Good evening to everyone and welcome to our Clinical Associate Career Information session. My name is Nqobile and I'll be your host this evening. A warm welcome to all of our students and all of our guests. We have Clinical Associate students from Walter Sisulu University, from the University of Pretoria and Wits University. Today, we are having our fifth webinars of monthly series. These are online sessions that will be held every first Monday of each month. So the aim of these webinars is for us to have qualified clinical associates to come in and share their journey as they navigate different workplaces and new endeavors. As a result, students gain insight into the postgraduate world and hear of a new professional development, activities, new paths, challenges, and achievements. So as mentioned, I will be your host for this evening. I am a clinical associate and an educator at the Wits Clinical Associate Program. I graduated from Wits University in 2014, and I started working as a clinical associate in 2015 within the public sector. I then joined the private sector in 2019. In 2021, I completed a diploma in public health, and I am currently studying towards my master's degree in public health. So as we gather today, we aim to strengthen clinical associate students' professional identity and to build communities of practice through connecting working clinical associates with students to share their experiences. This evening, we have three guest speakers. Our first speaker is Ms. Nonhlanhla Sefatsa, who graduated from the University of Witwatersrand in 2016 and is currently an educator at Wits University. Our second speaker is Ms. Tsoakae Mafatshe, who graduated from the University of Pretoria in 2013. She studied via the South African Military Health Services, has worked with CHAPS, and is currently working as a clinical research coordinator for the Perinatal HIV Research Unit. Our third and final speaker will be Ms. Nqobile Ngoma. Each of our speakers will have 10 to 15 minutes. Please post your questions in the chat space, and we will have a Q&A session after our last speaker has spoken. Also, please tag the year of your study and note which university you are from so that we can appreciate student involvement. Thank you once again to all of our speakers and our guests tonight for joining us. I will now hand over to our first speaker, Ms. Nonhlanhla Sefatsa.
Thanks, Kitsi. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for having me today. Thank you for the intro, Kitsi. I shall elaborate further. I'm just going to share my screen. I have a very short presentation to share with everyone. So as Kitsi mentioned, yes, I'm a clinical associate myself, Wits graduate from 2016, and I've been practicing since 2017, and the rest is history, really. So just to take you through my very colorful slides, it'll make sense later why they look like this. So what I wanted to cover today is a bit of my background, so my time before and during Wits as a student, my clinical career, which is after university, and the irony of coming back to the same university to teach, and also to talk about entrepreneurship, which is basically the glue and the reason behind everything. Like I said, I myself was a student in 2016. There's pictures from my first year at university. Gray scrubs, yes, no longer maroon as we have now. Picture in the middle is quite nostalgic and out of context, but that was one of the before the buses to South Rand actually happened at Wits. We used to take taxis to get to South Rand, and that was one of the taxis we had to use on our first time going to clinicals. So I hear students now going on and on and on about how terrible it is to travel to sites, but yeah, this was once a reality for us in our time. So I'm born and bred in Durban, from Umlazi township in Durban, the south of Durban, and went to school there and applied to Wits like most of us here on this webinar, and got accepted, and had to just have a complete shift from being that township girl to now living in the big city. These pictures were actually taken maybe in the first 3 months of relocating to Joburg. So that was something else, but it was an interesting journey, and it's what has led us to us being here. And then so yeah, then I went through the 3 years of med school, and I was fortunate enough to do my first year in Joburg, and then my second year I was in the Northwest. So I got a taste of rural medicine. So I was in Lihurutsi, very, very in the Northwest, close to Mafikeng, if I'm not mistaken. So that's where I did my second year and just really learned our basic skills. And then in third year, I got to tour around more of the Northwest, serving at places like Tsepong in Glegstorp, Job Shimankana in Rustenburg, and Daung District Hospital in Daung, of course. So that's my student journey, and I'm very grateful for the rural experience, because that's where I figured out, how what kind of clinician I was going to become, and that small sense of independence, because of the work, not workload, but the staffing situation in rural Northwest. So as students, we were called upon to take on tasks that at the time, our students, I wouldn't dare or hope to find themselves in such situations. So things like learning circumcision. So by the time we were in third year, final rotation, we were just running the circumcision clinic with one of the CAs overseeing our cutting, with the other two students that we were with there. So by the time I finished the course at the end of 2016, I was just ready to jump onto a CHAPS course to just get certification that, I can perform a circumcision. And that was very valuable, because that afforded me the opportunity to then immediately after, in December, finishing the course, get onto a CHAPS course in January, and I was locuming for CHAPS and other organizations that were running circumcisions to at least be able to get some bread, because that time between finishing school and finding work is very tricky. So you need to like prepare yourself to hit the ground running. So if I had not participated in that free labor that we were performing at Daung District and at Tsepong, it wasn't going to, it was going to be a different story today. Things may have taken a bit longer than they needed to. So it was very important to leave the clinical space as a student, get the practice number. Hooray, that's great. But do I have the actual skills to actually, get paid to do things, So at that particular time, yeah, I was ready to face the world and start my clinical career, because of the endless hours I'd put in during third year to gain those valuable skills, your suturing skills, and so forth. So by the time it was time to see locums come through, just jump on them. Didn't have to second guess myself. Am I sure? Who will be there to supervise me? I have a practice number now, so it's important. It's important for your patient. It's important for yourself, so that you're not at risk at any given point. So right after school, did a few circumcision locums, and then there was a clinic that opened up called Quali Health. A lot of clinical associates in my time. That was kind of one of the first places that opened up and just took us in. So this picture on the left is from one of the in between patients, and with colleagues. So there it was my first introduction into primary healthcare, seeing patients by myself, prescribing, and then getting your counter signature from your senior, and just being a clinical associate. So I wasn't afforded, unfortunately, the opportunity to work in government, which was such a loss for government, after serving all that time as a student. So I jumped straight into the private sector, and all my clinical practice is based on in private practice. So And that's me, and I'll tell you more about that. So started off at a GP in 2017, stayed there for a year, and there were some hiccups, as all workplaces will have at some certain points. Business is business. And I left at the end of 2017. Then in January 2018, I started locuming again for circumcision clinics for some time. And really, it's still early stages, first year working, you really don't know what you're doing. You just, as long as I'm getting paid, and now you do big things and get cards and so forth, so you got bills. So yeah, I had to keep that going. And in the middle of July 2018, I got a call to say from Mr. Scott, at that time was the HOD, to say, no, listen, we're looking for some clinical tutors at the sites, and also for skills teaching, are you available? And I said, please, you know. So I jumped on that, and that's how I found myself in this position to be doing to be an associate lecturer teaching clinical skills, and doing site visits and bedside teaching. And that's what I've been doing from 2018 to about 2019. There's a lot of movement in my career. I don't like standing still, and I think people choose to sit still, but I move around. So the opportunity came about to be the DICAP coordinator, which is basically running the ELogbook program that we use at the university. So basically, from instead of a paper logbook, we have a digital logbook, which myself, I was part of the pilot. So Comcare started right in front of me. I was part of well, not experiment, the pilot. Yeah, that's the word to use. And so, yeah, I used it as a student to log my patients and skills, and, it worked out. And so now I had to now run it. So it was a great experience, and I'm still doing that now, which has actually influenced my current postgrad diploma, which I'm doing, which is a postgrad diploma in healthcare technology management, and I'm doing that through UCT. So that's very much aligned with two things that I actually have a keen interest in, which is clinical itself, and then also digital health, because that's where the future is going. And there's a lot of health innovations that have come about and are still yet to come about, especially here in South Africa, because we're yet to catch up with the rest of the world. In terms of digital healthcare. So that's where my career is progressing, to kind of bring the two. And there's just a lot going on. But with all that being said, I learned from a very, very early stage in my career that it's not only just the clinical part. I'm not here to go to work, get a paycheck another day and come back. I've always had a keen interest and understood myself to be a service provider more than just a clinical associate and just, an academic at this point. So that led to always be thinking, not narrow but wide, to say, this needs to expand. I need to be, constantly branching out and finding things to do and be relevant, because again, I am a service provider. So that leads us to the entrepreneur. There's a mirror on there because you're looking at her. So the clinical side of things is more just a capital, more funder of the bigger things that are to come. So what I did was, with the locums, with the little gigs that I was getting, using it to start businesses that will then potentially bring passive income with time. So I've invested most of my money in property, and now in digital healthcare, because like I said, we are service providers. We are not just clinical associates. So I think the bigger picture we need to always look at, if that's something that's an interest to you. Of course, not everyone is designed or supposed to go through with this, but it's something that, like I said, always understood from when I graduated, and I came across a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad, an ancient book, but read it in between my surgery and peds rotation, which were not very kind to me. But yeah, so and I was like, no, there's more to this, So yeah, so with time and learning things, in between, you realize that okay, behind all of these jobs and so forth, there, we are service providers, and there is a need for clinical associates in healthcare, and this is the route that I've chosen for myself. Back to these questions that I may have missed, things like the role of a clinical associate in the workplace. I mentioned that we are service providers. We provide and we're integral parts of the healthcare system, and it's unfortunate, the perception from outside versus how we see it, because I've never seen it the way that in the negative context, because I wouldn't be where I am if I did, would have been that first GP job, and oh well, let me go study something else. So I kept with it. I understood the skills and the context of what I had learned, and now how to expand on it and make it more relevant for me. So how to make it work for me. It isn't again, not a task for anybody else, and it's not to say that people that went into postgrad right after, this is just my alternative way out, or way forward, really, not really way out, because I'm still here. We're trying to produce more clinical associates every day at the university, and it's 360, to be a student. You get a 360 view, be a student, and then full circle, come back, be a lecturer, and then undergoing the whole postgrad programs myself. Now, you get to see the entire picture of education, and also just the career progression of a clinical associate, and how they decide what they want to become. And I'm sure with the other guests that we're going to hear from today, you'll hear very interesting renditions of how things started off with PCMP, but where we're at now. Personal achievements in the workspace. So I ran a circumcision clinic, in 2018. So I was a clinical manager. Um, it was cool, but it wasn't for me. Another personal achievement is working with DICAP. I was able to Wits DICAP. So DICAP is digital inclusion, clinical and academic practice, which is basically my entire career wrapped into one, the clinical side, the digital side, and it's just perfect. It works for me. I was able to, through that work, to go to Zambia and present at Levi Mwanasa academic. It's a university, yes, it's a university, LLMMU. That was a very it was my first time going international, by the way. So I got exposed to so many like-minded people, and it really changed my what's the word? Perspective of the role that I play in DICAP and in our BCMP division. Challenges experienced and how I overcame them. Being an adult is a challenge. Just leaving school is a challenge. So work-wise, the challenges was, well, guess keeping work and getting work. But like I said, I left school knowing that, being up for the challenge to say, I need to find work, and how am I going to find it? And I need to, bring something to the table. I can't just bring HPCSA, that's it. I need to bring more than that. So that's what I did. And that was the first challenge. And every other challenge that I've faced, it's always been a thing of, as in Zulu, we're saying, including Akulum, so I won't be beaten by something that doesn't speak, so I'll move forward. And then the last one, closing words, I guess, to say to the clinical associate students that are listening out there, we meet a lot in the university context, but you are in charge of your future. And I let students know very openly to say, we give you the fundamentals, and you need to pave your way in this world. We all didn't just sit with we finished school, there's a sticker on your forehead, yay, and work is going to come to you, or anything in life, really. It will not just bring itself to you. I'll leave with this quote that I live by, and I think every entrepreneur should live by, is opportunity dances with those on the dance floor. So if you're not putting yourself out there, right? So the only choice you make for yourself is either you're going to put yourself out there, get a few doors slammed in your face. That's just how it is. That's life. It's part of the gig. Not everybody's not gonna like is gonna like you. You're not money. So opportunity dances with those on the dance floor. So break a move. Thank you for your time.
Wow, thank you so much, Nonhlanhla. You said quite a lot of stuff, and I'm thinking to myself, I sit next to you almost every day. I don't know these things about you. Very interesting. Thank you, and very inspirational.
Thanks.
So we can move on to our second guest speaker. We've got Miss Tsoakae Mafatshe.
Hi, everybody. It's actually Mrs., but it's okay. As the host said, my name is Tsoakae Mafatshe. I'm a clinical associate, born and raised from Welcome in the Free State. And basically, my presentation actually has all of the things that I need to say because, yeah, I'm not a pictures person, very a bit technical. So I had to write everything so that I can remember it. So this is a bit of my background. I graduated in 2013 and from the University of Pretoria as a clinical associate. And I'm currently busy with my postgraduate diploma in public health at the University of Pretoria. And I actually joined the military in 2008 and later on got afforded the opportunity to study BCMP at the University of Pretoria. I graduated and left the military. As soon as I graduated, they sent us to Cape Town, and I'll never forget. I think this was the turning point in my life. I actually thought I would live and breathe the military for the rest of my life until I actually saw how hectic things were outside. After the comfort of varsity and taken care of and all of that, we were deployed or put in a hospital in Cape Town. And at that point, they told us, you guys are going to be clinical associates there or helping out with some nursing duties, only to find that we actually going to do bedside nursing, assisting and all of that. And from there, I just contacted my varsity and I was like, guys, I need to leave the military. And I was lucky enough to be given the contacts of the CEO at the time of CHAPS, which is Center for HIV and AIDS Prevention Studies, where they let me do circumcisions. So I stayed there for about 2.5 years. Yeah, so our CVs, most of us actually quite, we hop on and off, we here and there because you're still kind of trying to figure out what's happening as a CA. And I think as the previous speaker said, as an adult, you need to make things work. So that's what happened to my life. I joined CHAPS. That's where I believe I fell in love with research, and that's actually where I'm coming to. I started doing circumcisions and learning how they got to actually start circumcisions. So CHAPS was actually the first company that started circumcisions in South Africa. The co-CEO at that time, I think Dirk Darliard, something like that. I'm sorry if I'm wrong. He's the one that actually started with this research, trying to figure out, the prevention or actually the decrease of the HIV with circumcised males and stuff like that. So I think that's where I got involved, like loving research, being curious about how do things happen, how did it just come about? Like circumcisions is a thing now, all of a sudden, you know what I mean? So yeah, that was it. For a while, my life was just circumcisions. I did training. At the time, Chaps was the only trainer. So I trained all over, I think Joburg and I think the Free State. And I think I once trained somebody from Canada who came straight from there, and because there's no course like this. And yeah, so I did that, and then There was also a time where we started other smaller researchers within CHAPS, like the training when they try to formalize us. They actually brought in some people from, I think it's Japago, who were coming from Michigan and came to train us to better serve, South Africans and stuff. From there, I then joined PHRU. I felt that CHAPS was not serving me as a clinical associate. Another position showed up, and I joined PHRU in 2015 to 2016, where I was a program manager for one of their sites in Potchefstroom. And I must say, this is where I grew up a lot, not only as a clinician, but I learned the ins and outs of senior positions, like the toughness that comes with funding and NGOs and all of that, where you need to understand that it's not just about the procedure itself. You still have to understand that you need to bring the participants or the patients in so that the job can still continue. We were close to retrenchment due to funding, and I had to look for other opportunities. And I remember a post came out and they said they wanted a clinical associate at some company called RMPRU. At the time, when I looked at the job specs, it's talking about all these clinical site overview, clinical review, clinical research. And I was like, you know what? Let me do something else. It's been 3 years I've been doing this. Let me do something else. Then I went into clinical research, as I could say that it was kind of like the most interesting part of my life. In 2016, I joined what's now called Wits Vida, the Vaccines and Infectious Disease Analytics, formerly known as RMPRU. And I was a clinical associate first. They just hired me. I was the first one to be hired. They didn't know what to do with me. And they knew that we can do literally anything. We can work as nurses, we can work as doctors, we can do this and that. But we had a very visionary, I would say, supervisor. And he put us in one of their observational studies where we were doing minimally invasive tissue sampling. So that's actually a very beautiful word to say, minimally invasive tissue sampling. We were actually doing autopsies on babies from 0 to 5 years, but the autopsies were not real autopsies where you open the body and you take out all the parts. We were using the biopsy needles and taking samples from the brains, the lungs, the liver, the kidneys, blood, CSF, all of that. And from there, we weren't just doing the procedure, we weren't just taking these samples, we were ensuring that these samples were sent to the correct places. After that, we had to do interviews with the mothers because the main aim was to try and figure out what is the causes of death in children between 0 to 5 years. And this is not just babies who live and then they die. It's from stillborn and all of that, accidents, all types of deaths. Another person would say it's quite a scary kind of work, but the work honestly was very interesting and honestly enlightening because we learned so much about the research space. We learned so much about trying to figure out what is happening. And I think as a clinician, most of us are like that. Wherever you are, whether you are diagnosing patients in front of you, you are trying to figure out what is happening, what is causing this. So I think that time was very great, but it got a bit tiring, and motherhood had to happen first. So I felt pregnant and I needed to move away from the baby's autopsies. And I was fortunate enough to be called back at CHAPS to help out, but it was quite a short stay because, as I said, NGOs and funding. And yeah, so I did that for I think a year and a half. And I moved around a bit. Like Nonhlanhla said, we move around trying to figure out either you trying to look for money, to support the family, or you're trying to still figure out where do you fit in the space of clinical associate. And I think that's where I am right now. I'm currently a clinical research coordinator at PHRU, where we are, I'm coordinating multiple clinical trials. Yeah, so getting to the questions now. So the role of CAs, I'll say in PHRU because I think I've said quite a few things about where I've been. Currently where I am, I'll talk about it because if you look at our job specs, I'm probably the only clinical associate on paper, if I may put it that way. There's two of us, but the other one she's a site coordinator, which is quite a bit bigger, a bit higher than me, if I may put it that way. And I'm just a research coordinator. So in our company, that's where they saw we could be helped, where we could fit. I mean, so we help with studies, with clinical trials. We help coordinate everything, ensuring that, documents are sent to ethics, documents are signed off. It's a lot of admin and a lot of data, if I may put it that way. So there's a lot of data collection, and we need to ensure that all the data that we collect from the different clinical trials, it ranges from different trials. So where I am at, it's called the adult clinical trials unit. So we're looking at HIV studies, everything that has to do with HIV and adults. And I'll give you an example. One of the studies that we're doing right now is trying to see the efficacy of one of the HIV drugs. So this is just an example of what we do. And of course, we assist the doctors, but in the clinical space or clinical trial space, they are called investigators. So you'll get your medical officers who are called sub-investigators, and we assist them with running the clinical trials and ensuring that everything is in place before they see participants. And this will be from the forms that they have to write in, because it's not normal files. They've got specific rules and protocols that you need to follow. So as a coordinator, you need to ensure that every study is following the protocol or the SOPs and all of those things. And yeah, from this role, I have the opportunity of transitioning to clinical research associate. And I'm sure, well, some of you will see that there's quite a lot of posts out there that are clinical research associates, and people think that as a CA, it's automatic. You can go from clinical associate to clinical research associate, which is not the case, because they've got two different, of course, different job specs, different, even the degrees that we do are a bit different. But being a clinical associate and doing this work, the experience is helping me to have a bit of a notch above the CRAs, because CRAs are basically, normally people who have done either nursing or BScs in life sciences and all of that. But one of my mentors once told me that as a clinical associate, if we would fit into the clinical research associate spec, it would be so great, because not a lot of them are clinical. So we would understand studies not only from the administrative point, but also from the participant point of view. Okay. Achievements. Well, I don't know. I was actually laughing about it because there's so many things that I might say that I take for granted. One of them is during my time as a program manager. I remember there was a time when we needed numbers in Potchefstroom, and I just called my boss up and I said, you know what? There's a prison here, and I think that we should go there. And she was like, no, TK, we've been struggling. I don't know if you'll make it. And all of that. But I went there because I think my experience at CHAPS, which was in Joburg, gave me a bit of exposure in terms of recruitment, in terms of also knowing how to approach these different stakeholders. And yeah, we got that contract and our numbers went up. When we were supposed to be retrenched in June, it actually delayed it by a year, if I'm not mistaken. And of course, my second one is definitely being hired as the first clinical associate at Wits Vida. This has opened doors for subsequent clinical associates in the company. And most of the CAs that are there, I'm legit so proud of them. And, it's nice to see that, the company, they saw what CAs can do. And I mean, within, I think, 6 months or so, they hired more clinical associate posts that were mainly output for doctors or nurses or registered nurses, now they started seeing that, you know what, we would benefit more with clinical associates. And it was really encouraging to see that happening, and knowing that had I not, worked as hard as I did, maybe they would have said, you know what, this was a waste. But yeah, that was I think it's one of my favorite things in my life. Also, I had the opportunity of accompanying my principal investigator to investigator meeting in London, of which I'm a coordinator of the 3 clinical trials. It's one of, the biggest pharmaceutical companies in the world, and yeah, they offered me that opportunity. Challenges experience. I think this is very common for all of us. You'll find challenges at work, general, outside of being a clinical associate or whatever. There are a lot of challenges, but I guess you just need to remind yourselves why you are there and why you're doing it. If it's for the participants, if it's for you, if it's for your family, always have that at the back of your mind. So I think the one that's always been something that's been consistent in our field is people not understanding the role of clinical associates in the space. Even currently, finding that your duties are misaligned, especially in the research field. You'll be hired as a CA only to find that, this is only just nursing work, but because you want to learn and you've got you have a plan, you want to go somewhere, you'll hold on so that you can learn and take everything that you need to take so that it can propel you to the next level. And I must say, doing minor clinical work, vitals, blood sample draws, it's quite minor. And when you're looking at it from outside, you're like, you know what? I went to school for something more hectic than this. But yeah, you can do more. And it's normally temporary until you get your feet going into the more hectic stuff. And you realize that, okay, my job is more administrative. It's more supervisor level, academic space. It's all about that. It's not a lot on the clinical part of things. You have a lot of administrative overseeing, coordinating, and that is also very interesting. The nice thing is that the challenges are also, they're motivating. They don't make you bored at work. And, of course, I think this last one is the one that actually disappoints me the most, the fact that we cannot be delegated as clinical researchers. So in clinical trials, sub-investigators or doctors, I'll just give you an example briefly. So when participant comes for whatever study, you get where they get seen by the nurses, which is the vitals room. From the vitals, they will go to the doctors to be seen like your normal consultation visit, where they do a physical exam and everything. If the participant or patient has any issues outside of the trial or anything, it's your discretion to diagnose and prescribe whatever. So I am limited because as a clinical associate, the South African Health Product Regulatory Authority has not yet allowed us to do this, but a lot of our principal investigators, a lot of the professors, they're still trying to fight and get us into this because they realize that clinical associates are able to do this. I think the problem with clinical trials is that there's so much red tape that our lack of, we need to be supervised by a medical officer. That is the problem here. And so this is something that they're still trying to figure out. And I'm hoping that in my time as a CA, I'll see that happening, where people will definitely be delegated and be hired as clinical researchers and not just clinical researchers, coordinators. Okay, conclusions. I would say be resilient, of course, and adaptable. I think this is what CAs are. We are very resilient. I was listening to the first speaker, and I'm listening to how she's gone from all these other places and she's been rising above. And that's actually what we are. When you get into the workplace, you need to be resilient. You need to know that when you fall, you need to get up. There's so many things that will hinder you, or that will try to hinder you, if I may put it that way, but try to rise to the challenge. And of course, know yourself. If you know yourself, you know your strengths, you know your limitations, and then adapt to your environment and always rise when knocked down. But I think the most important is remember you are not just a clinical associate. You are a researcher, you're a clinician, you're a project manager, you're a coordinator, and I mean, also an entrepreneur. So you guys can be so much more, not just clinical associate. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. That was truly inspirational. Then we're gonna move on to our third and final guest for tonight, Miss Ngqobile Ngoma.
So as introduced, now I'm not a Mrs. So you went into the wrong titles, but I forgive you. It's Ngoma Nqobile. I'm an epidemiologist at the NICD. I hope every clinician in the house knows what NICD is. So I'm here to present or to share with you the real world work experiences that I've had so far. So this is the outline for the purpose of the time that is left up to 7. I'll just run through. So we start with my background. They ask for my personal background. So as I've said, I'm an epidemiologist at the NICD, and I'm from a family of 10, and I'm number 4. So I'm a child of the pastor. So you can imagine I'm the holiest child in this earth. So I'm also a mother of 2 girls. And on qualifications, my first qualification actually it was an IT system support engineer diploma from the CTU Training Solutions somewhere in mainland in Pretoria. So that was my first qualification before I went to med school. And then I went on to do the BCMP at UP, and I did the postgraduate diploma HIV and AIDS management at University of Stellenbosch. I just completed 2 years ago my MPH in epidemiology and biostats, particularly the field epidemiology track at UP and the NICD. So yes, I'm currently working on my PhD in epidemiology at the same university at UP. So looking at the role of clinical associate, I was asked to share that part, but unfortunately with my current company, it's not a clinically focused company. Therefore, the generalists or the clinicians are not really much involved, except for the whereby, because since the NICD is really the National Public Health Institute in South Africa, or so it works mostly about public health. Therefore, it also has some reference laboratory for in support of the National Department of Health. So they're mainly looking at pathology, virology, epidemiology, disease surveillance, the public health research and training. Therefore, clinical associates, they don't really play much of a role. As you can see, it's mostly the specialized components of the healthcare system. But I will share my previous training with you, of which I hope you'll find it interesting. So now moving on the personal achievement, I'll start with my life as a clinician because I feel that's where most of the clinicians in the house can relate to. So I love this part that I was internationally trained. So I was a UP student, but I got an opportunity to go and spend my elective period in Malawi. So at the time, I'm not sure if it's still happening at this time. At the time, they used to like take a few students, 2 students, one would be going to the USA, another one would be going to somewhere in Africa, in Malawi, just to go and learn on the clinical officers' practices and come back and report and see where we can improve ours. So I was one of those students at the time who was taken to Malawi. So this played a huge role in my clinician life because when I went there, I was trained in Mamelodi Hospital. Since it's one of the busiest hospitals, I had achieved all the competencies that were expected of us around August. And since my elective was between September and October, so when I went to Malawi, I had already completed my logbook. So I didn't have much to learn. I had learned so much of what was expected from a clinical associate student. So going into an African country that has clinical officers that do not have limitations as South African healthcare system, because clinical officers in Malawi, they are way more than the actually medical doctors, because medical doctors are trained internationally and they started being trained in their country in the recent years. So the clinical officer is the most common course than the MPCHB. So therefore, their clinical officers do not have these constraints that we have in the country. So when I got there, they checked on my logbook and said, you achieved everything already. What do we teach you? So I took advantage and told them, teach me surgery. I want a cut. They said, which type of surgery? Are you specific? I said, I just want obs and gynae, nothing else. So for that reason, the entire period of my elective period, I was in obs and gynae, particularly in surgery. I was just doing surgical procedures. So coming back into the country, I was already a surgeon and a very competent one. But just to put it out there to say, in normal deliveries, I was competent in cutting normal deliveries. So now getting into the workplace, one of the achievements is that I happened to lead the ward or to head the ward. So this came after like many years of like strict supervision. Because as I've said, I came back competent in surgery, but coming in South Africa, they still have those trust issues. They still needed to supervise me to be confident in actually giving me those responsibilities. So just to say, no one must risk with their license and the license of the hospital. So you need to be working with your senior doctors and to be supported by the clinical managers. And they are the ones who will give you such responsibilities if they see it fit. So I happen to be one of them. I wouldn't say very lucky, but it was through the hard work and the competence and the excellence that I had shown over the years. So eventually I happened to lead the ward, and I was responsible to compile, I'm sure you know, M&M meetings. So I would compile monthly statistics and present the perinatal and maternal mortality statistics. And I'll also continue the training. I did ESMO. I'm sure most of you know ESMO. So I was also an ESMO trainer in the district. So I was training clinical associates, doctors, and nurses. So since I was the head of the ESMO trainers at the time, so I also on these M&M meetings, I would share the skills and pass on the skill and make sure that especially the clinic nurses, because the M&M is being attended by is the hospital and the provincial office, as well as all the catchment areas or the clinics around that particular hospital. Therefore, I would make sure that everyone is on par in terms of the ESMO. They're able to identify the obstetric emergencies and actually manage them appropriately. So I also trained BLS and ACLS, helping babies breathe and neonatal resuscitation, as well as obstetric ultrasound. As you can see, these are the things that I took it upon my shoulders, especially during the year where I was still working under direct supervision in terms of surgery. So I also went on to do all these courses to build my skills and to ensure that at least I get to be competent and also certified to actually conduct these duties. So as a result, I was a very competent surgeon. I also was appointed as a BCMP facilitator at the hospital. So we would have students that are coming in every year to come and rotate in our hospital. So I was responsible for those students. So I was profiled by the United States of America, the Healthcare Coalition, during the Healthcare Worker Week. So that was in 2018, in that particular year, they took upon themselves to actually look into the women in the frontline healthcare services globally. So I was one of the women in South Africa that were chosen, and they did a mini profile on me. So this is just a picture showing as I've said, that I was responsible to training now to pass on the skills, especially the surgical skills, to the incoming servers. So we never had clinical associate in my hospital. We were just two, but the other clinical associate I had was competent in casualty, and he was not interested in maternity. So he never rotated. You were not forced to rotate in maternity. So only those doctors that were willing to come and learn the skills, and then I would have to teach them. So these are the pictures of one of those activities. As you can see now, we are closing. At the first, we're opening the womb, taking the baby out. This is one of the servers who's actually observing the procedure and assisting me. And this is the second picture. So now looking into my current world, because that was my previous world while I was still practicing as a clinical associate, which I'm not anymore. But presently, I would say my achievement is really, I completed my master's with 11 distinction and average of 76. And those that are in public health or postgraduate, when we're talking about biostatistics and epidemiology, they can tell you how intensive are those two modules. So passing with these remarks was highlight of my 2021. So I also was nominated as a pioneer healthcare worker of choice by, didn't mention this, that I've been working with the SAPC as their health expert. So one of the followers then, therefore, because of my long-standing years and giving them support, especially during the pandemic, they nominated me and wrote a profile on me just appreciating my contribution, especially during the pandemic. I also got to be profiled by the National Health Laboratory Services. I'm sure we all know the NHLS. They were celebrating last year during the Youth Month in June. So they were taking the young people less than 35 years of age who are serving more, are going beyond the call of duty. So I was also profiled by them. Then I was featured by the TEFINET. TEFINET is now the global, as we know that there's WHO that we all submit under. So TEFINET is where the field epidemiologists are all submitting under. It's a global network for field epidemiologists. So I was also featured during the year 2021 on the World Field Epidemiology Day. This is the 7th of September in each and every year. There's a World Field Epidemiology Day where they commemorate the contribution and the work that field epidemiologists are doing in their respective countries. So I happened to represent South Africa in that platform and I was featured. So I also won the best oral presentation. My colleague spoke about her international scientific conference that she attended. So since now I'm an epidemiologist, that is really my duty. I do attend a lot of conferences every time to go and share the research findings that we have and all of that. So I happen to win the best oral presentation award in this international conference where we had more than 70 countries that were represented. So I end, and I'm sure you know of this, is an international accolade, the Global Golden Key International Society. So this is based on my first achievement that I mentioned. So they also ran a profile for me as similar to the NHLS one. So I would just count the last one would be the 5 published research articles, those that are working towards their research field. They would understand what is meant by this. And I mean, I'm 2 years in practice and I had 5 published articles already and 6 scientific conference presentations. So the first picture is just the NHLS profile that I just told you about. The second one is the Golden Key profile. It's their feature there. And the third one is the epidemiology support. As I've said, that I have been supporting, especially during the pandemic, the SAPC, not just the SAPC. There's radio stations, community radio station. This was the Mpumalanga Clinical Care Platform. So where they gathered all the clinical clinicians in Mpumalanga, being the nurses and allies and doctors and clinical associates in one platform to try and give them support during the pandemic. So since clinicians wouldn't have the epidemiological expertise, and then they will need epidemiologists to come and give the latest research to interpret what does the data mean, especially when now we came into introducing the vaccines. Now we are turning back AstraZeneca. We can remember the drama that happened. So I had to be in the forefront and support my fellow clinicians because I was once one of them. So this is another post that just shows my contribution. These are my weekly show because I have weekly show with the SAPC where I get to teach them about any health topics that is burning to the listeners. So this is my latest contribution. I'm sure you know of the cholera outbreak, the current cholera outbreak in the country. This is the SAPC TV. I think it's last week. I had this interview with them last week. So those are just some of the highlights. We won't finish if we start going much into this. So the challenges that I experienced, I would quickly start with my life as a clinician. An unknown and unclear identity. As you know, being a CA, especially we were part of the first group of CAs. Now people kind of like know about us, but back in the day it was very difficult. Even ourselves, we didn't understand who we are. And when we go out there, it was very difficult to even explain what you are supposed to be doing. And all of that. So we had that uncertainty in terms of our identity as CAs. So to counteract that, I had to make sure that I study my scope of practice, like keep it like a Bible, have it everywhere I go, so that I can know my limitation, I can know what I should do, what I can't do, what I should do under supervision at one, and contextualize it according to the workplace that I was working at. But I had to take it upon my shoulders to know it by heart so that I can communicate it and negotiate it with my superiors. I said that I also had to know my strengths personally and academically as well as professionally, my strengths and weaknesses. For instance, I knew that mental health was not my strongest point. but I knew that obs and gynae was obviously my strongest point. And I looked at my situation in the hospital and check what are the strengths and weak points of the hospital so that I can correlate the two and capitalize on this information. Hence, I was able to be moved to maternity, of which it wouldn't happen to any other doctor, but I managed to do that. Then I ensure that I actually got to be excellent in my work. One thing about me, I make sure that wherever I pass, my footprints speak for me. You know, I wouldn't make notes, I wouldn't tell people how much I know, what is what, but I make sure that I learn, I study as much as I can, I become a sponge, and I absorb as much information and skills around the people that came before me as possible, so that when I start standing on my feet, I make sense and I make sure that I only produce excellence. So that alone made it actually paved a way for subsequent clinical associates, and it made sure that the managers of the hospital had to, they didn't have a choice, they had to like really admire and recognize the contribution that I made and really support me throughout. Another challenge was not being well. You know, it's one thing with clinicians, because we're all clinicians and these people are doctors. The more they work with you, then they get to appreciate you and to better accept you. But then you still have to deal with allied healthcare workers. You still have to deal with pharmacists. I had huge problem with pharmacists. They would, all the prescriptions that I'm writing, they would send the patient back. There was like so much drama for 2 good years. It was so frustrating. I remember we went into depression. Being a CA was not nice at all in the early years of my life, because now other healthcare workers that are not doctors were not accepting of us. It were only two, and we were the very first in that particular hospital. So it was crazy at that time. But to counteract that, my strong relationship with my clinical manager and the CEO of the hospital actually played a huge role, because these people were able to stand up for me when we start those fights start blowing out like that. And then I would just write to them to say, this is what is happening. I don't think I'm comfortable. I feel threatened and I'm not feeling safe. I'm not coming to this matter is sorted. So they would stand up for me, because they know that there's things that nobody can do but Ngoma can. So based on that, they will have to stand up for me so that I can come to the hospital, because there's so, if I'm not there, there'll be deaths, there'll be maternal deaths and all of that. So the strong relationship we had and my excellence made sure that I get that backup from my superiors. So now as an epidemiologist, my challenge is also is being a known epidemiologist is one thing, because most people got to know about it during the pandemic, but they don't know what exactly is it, what's your role. So we get such problems, especially now when we have to work with clinicians. Clinicians are patient facing. So since epidemiologists are not patient facing, they are super specialists, then they are not well understood. So you still meet so much resistance. People feel like, why should we help you? We're helping you with your studies, with our data, with our patients, but we get to see our patients alone. So you still get to meet that part of resistance, especially when we start working with disease surveillance and the likes. But yeah, again, what works is to sit everyone down and to try and have a brief meeting and explain briefly a summary of what epidemiology is and why are we here at that particular point in time, the interventions or the study that we are bringing about, and highlight the successes of the previous epidemiological interventions so that people can actually bring it into context. And then emphasize the One Health approach, because the healthcare system, you won't win this battle alone as clinicians. Not even epidemiologists can win them by themselves. We need all hands on deck. We need to work together and collaborate. So that's what works. And also to be an NICD affiliate, because NICD is not Department of Health. So when you go to the hospital, you still meet that resistance to say, but it's not one of us. You're not in your scrubs, or the way you are dressed. Like, you get that people don't feel like you are one of them, so you still get that resistance. And to counteract that is to try to explain the activities and the purpose, especially the rationale on where do they fit in and where do you fit in, so that we all achieve this one goal. So that's what works. And another challenge is intense work pressure. And what works for me is really to have psychotherapy. I have a personal psychologist and a psychiatrist specifically, because getting that master's degree really almost got me into psychiatric hospital. It was very tough. So those are what works for me, and really to prioritize and have your time management and your plan in place. So that's really what works for me. So in conclusion, I would say to everyone listening, I would really encourage you to refuse to be ordinary. What you do, make sure you do it to the best of your capability. If you're not sure, sit back, research, make sure that you know your story. And when you start standing up, make sure you do whatever you do to the best of your capability. Refuse to be the same version as yesterday. So keep on improving yourself regularly. So a little progress each day adds up to big results, and therefore we need to have that time management on our fingertips. So no matter how high God also takes us, we need to always remain humble and to be helpful to those that are in need. And lastly, to achieve success, you need to fight for it. We need to all work very, very hard and find something that encourages us and inspire us to hold on and to continue the good fight. These are my references. Those who are interested in the things that I've spoken about is mainly my articles and the bios that I told you guys about. Thank you very much.
Wow, wow, wow. Hey, that was amazing. Ngoma, you now have my number. We are now dying at biostats. Please, I need a tutor. I am waving a flag saying, please help. Thank you so much for your presentation. That was very informative. And thank you to all three of our speakers. So we'll take one question for each of the speaker. I have noted some of the questions that are on the chat space. So we have the first question from Ms. Nonhlanhla Sefatsa. Outside of providing the clinical services rather, how else can clinical associates use the degree in the business space? Then we have a question for Tsoakae. Did you have to do a research course to work at the PHRU as a research coordinator? Those are the two questions that I've noted so far. So maybe if we can start with Ms. Nonhlanhla Sefatsa and then followed by Ms. Tsoakae. Thank you.
Well, like I said, I generalized it and said, we're service providers. So that's number one, need to find out what is needed, from you, and then you provide that particular need. But to give examples, so starting from the basic level of providing a service is being a locum, right? So you're not working there full time, you're sessional. So you're there in your free time. So that itself is business because it's outside of your your day-to-day earnings. So you're charging per hour. You are invoicing. I hope we are invoicing our locums. People, you must invoice for tax purposes, and then it starts off there. Over time, there are multiple ways. So what I get into as well in my spare time is medical aid billing. So I'm involved with the likes of ER consulting, amongst a few, to get their medical aid billing up to date. So it's the correspondence of making sure what is written down in the clinical notes appears on the admin side, and sometimes there's a mismanagement of that, and so there's a department called case management, which then a clinician is making sure that it's not, because admin just reads codes and copies them onto the invoice, whereas clinicians are not the greatest admin keepers, as you know. So certain things are lost in between the lines. So we go there with a fine-tooth comb and then make sure that that's there. I'm in the healthcare technology space now, so there are many opportunities for health innovation that need digital solutions. So you get approached by companies that need to streamline, like from things like electronic medical record keeping. So sometimes we have this problem. You work with logbooks. I'm tired of writing physical notes. It's a mission when bookkeeping or when keeping stats, or getting audited is just a mess. So how do I streamline this into one digital solution to actually get my medical aid billing and my note taking all together? So working behind the scenes. So everything that you see that works in a hospital that is healthcare or is technology related, because that's really what it is. It's technology within a healthcare setting. That's healthcare technology. There's somebody behind there with a clinical brain and a technological brain who's bringing the two together. Healthcare technology managers go outside of, like me, I focus more on software, but I have colleagues that now I study with at UCT that are in the equipment side of things. So the updating, maintaining, and procuring of medical equipment, things as big as large as CT scans, MRI machines, to the smallest of things like an ECG machine. Somebody needs to be managing all of that. So there's a lot of opportunities. It's always asking how or who does that or who manages, how did this get here, basically? Because you assume that a radiology machine, an X-ray machine is there and the radiographer brought it there. No, it has nothing to do with the radiographer. The radiographer now has a job because the healthcare technology manager, assessed, planned, and all and so forth to actually have that equipment there. So a lot of things that we have used as clinical associates and keep hospitals running are managed by healthcare technology managers who are, can be clinical associates who have studied in this field. It's a great question. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Ms. Nonhlanhla. And I think the last question then we can take for Mrs. Tsoakae. Did you have to do any research course to work at PRQ as a research coordinator?
So no, you don't actually have to do a course. What happens is you apply for the job, and if they see that your credentials are okay, like your experience, they will train you, because I did it. I think my experience helped me. But even in the first place, when I went to Vida, they did not look at my certificates and everything like that, because there is a certificate that you can do. It's called Good Clinical Practice. I would advise you, if you want to go into the clinical realm, start there, because all of us, it's the one that we need. It's the basis of everything. And I don't know if I can just, yeah. So if you start with that, it's called a GCP. You can go online and check who offers it. It's a short course of like 3 days or so. And there's also a clinical research coordinator course. But I would really advise somebody to do that when they've got a bit of experience with research, because you'll see that with research, in terms of how things are done, it's not clinical. It's not as clinical, and you don't get away with a lot as easy as you would with clinical work. So there's protocols and all of that. So they teach you the history of how they get to the protocols and all of that. And yeah, it basically sets you up for everything else in research. So you can apply for clinical trials coordinator. You can apply for a CTA, clinical trials assistant. You can even start at regulatory, although of course financially this will be a bit less money. But honestly, I would advise you to, if there's nothing else for you to do, as I said, be adaptable and resilient. Apply for those posts, and you'll see yourself going higher even in those spaces. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all three of our guests. Thank you to all of the students and other externals that have joined our session tonight. It was a very productive and a very inspirational talk that we had this evening. Thank you all, and good night.